What if the door you have been praying to see open is not closed because the answer is no, but because persistence itself is part of what prepares you to receive? When Jesus taught, "Knock, and the door will be opened," he was not describing one desperate knock followed by silence and surrender. Behind this teaching, we are going to explore two powerful Aramaic ideas: ene, connected with knocking and persistent action, and amin, connected with firmness, faithfulness, and what can be relied upon. Today you will hear how these words are pronounced, why the Aramaic world behind the teaching can reveal shades of meaning that English alone may not preserve, and what persistence looks like when it is joined to conscious intention. Stay with me, because before this teaching is over, the question will no longer be simply, why hasn't my door opened? It will become, who am I becoming while I continue to knock? The human problem behind this teaching is not simply impatience. It is what happens inside us when expectation meets delay. You pray, you work, you hope, you approach the same door again, and eventually the silence begins to speak louder than your original conviction. That is the dangerous moment, because many people interpret delay as rejection before they have understood what persistence is doing within them. This is where the familiar teaching of Jesus becomes much more challenging. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 7 within the Sermon on the Mount, we encounter the sequence commonly translated as ask, seek, knock. The final image is extraordinary because knocking assumes something important. There is a door between where you are and where you desire to enter, and to they. Two Aramaic ideas will guide our journey: nakshu and amin. Pronounced the first approximately, nakshu carries the concrete image of knocking or striking at an entrance. It gives the teaching movement. You do not merely stand before the door thinking about entering. You approach it and act. The second is amin, pronounced approximately amin. It belongs to a different semantic world: firmness, reliability, faithfulness, something established or trustworthy. You already recognize its descendant in the familiar amen. But here we will use amin, complementary Aramaic idea, rather than pretending that Matthew 7 contains a hidden two-word formula. That distinction matters. The power is not in inventing words. Jesus never spoke in that verse. The deeper lesson emerges when we place the action of naku beside the firmness represented by amin. Keep approaching the door, but do not allow every delay to dismantle the inner foundation from which you approach it. This is persistence with intention. And in the next chapter, we go directly into naku sashu, because its depth begins where the English word knock seems to end. Before we go deeper, stay with me, because shortly I will guide you through a brief prayer practice that brings this teaching from the ancient language into the very door you are facing today. Now listen carefully to the sound. Nakshu, nakshu. The final sound gives the word wait. Nak. When you hear it, remember the physical image behind the teaching. Someone has reached a boundary, raised a hand, and acted. A door does not disappear because you understand it intellectually. The person must approach. This physical quality is one reason Semitic language background can add texture to the sayings associated with Jesus. Aramaic was the everyday language closely associated with his Galilean world, while the canonical Gospels that preserve these teachings for us were written in Greek. So exploring Aramaic should not become an excuse to manufacture secret translations. Its value is more disciplined and, in many ways, more beautiful. It helps us enter the linguistic and cultural world in which Jesus taught. And NQSH, U gives us an especially vivid picture. Knocking means that desire has become action. You may want restoration, purpose, a new opportunity, reconciliation, or direction. But persistence begins when intention repeatedly becomes movement. You'll return to what matters. You take the next faithful step. You refuse to confuse one unanswered moment with the end of the story. Yet there is another layer. Persistent knocking is not frantic repetition. If you knock on 10 different doors every few seconds, that is not necessarily persistence. It may simply be confusion. Conscious persistence requires discernment. It asks whether the door is worthy, whether the intention is aligned with what is good, and whether your actions are becoming more mature as you continue. This prepares us for Amin. NAQSH. U describes the movement toward the door. Amin will help us understand the firmness that prevents the heart from collapsing while waiting. One concerns repeated action. The other gives us language for steadiness, and that is why pronunciation matters beyond merely learning an ancient sound. When you slowly say, Nakshu, let it remind you, approach, act, remain awake, and knock again. The door may not have opened yet, but delay does not automatically mean that your journey has ended, and the best is yet to come. In the next chapters, you'll discover what could change everything for you. Before we uncover the depth of Amin, bring to mind one door you have been knocking on for a long time. Not every door must open, but when your intention is aligned with what is true and good, waiting can become a place of discernment rather than defeat. God, I come before you, carrying the door that has remained closed in my life. Teach me Nakshu to approach with courage, to act with wisdom, and to persist without allowing delay to become despair. Give me Amin firmness when nothing seems to move, faithfulness when I cannot yet see the answer. Purify my intention so I do not chase what is not meant for me. If this door is right, strengthen me to keep knocking. If another path is wiser, give me clarity to recognize it. Amen. Notice what this prayer does not ask for. It does not demand that every closed door open. That would turn persistence into stubbornness. Instead, it asks for something deeper. The wisdom to distinguish between faithful persistence and attachment to an outcome that may need to change. This distinction transforms the teaching. Nakshu is not permission to force circumstances, manipulate people, or assume that enough repetition guarantees whatever we desire. The image of knocking preserves something essential. You knock because the door is not yours to break down. Persistence acts, but it also respects the boundary. Anna Amin, pronounced approximately Amin, adds another dimension. Its linguistic family carries ideas of firmness, reliability, faithfulness, and trustworthiness. It is related to the familiar Amen, the affirmation that something is established, trustworthy, or truly affirmed. Again, Aminan is not secretly inserted into Matthew 7 beside Nakush. We are bringing these two Aramaic ideas together to illuminate the spiritual character of persistence. Nrqsh. U gives persistence its action. Amin gives persistence its foundation. This changes the question. Instead of asking only, how many times must I knock? Ask, can I remain faithful while I knock? Because sometimes the greatest transformation happens before the door ever moves. Imagine two people standing before the same closed door. Both knock, both hear silence, both return the next morning and knock again. Outwardly, their actions appear identical, but inwardly, they may be completely different. One is becoming consumed by fear. The other is learning steadiness. This is where Amin becomes essential to our understanding. Amin does not mean that believing intensely enough forces reality to obey us. Its deeper value lies in firmness and trustworthiness. Applied alongside Nakshu, it gives us a powerful pattern. Let your outward action remain persistent while your inward foundation becomes increasingly stable. This matters because delay exposes intention. When something arrives immediately, we rarely discover how deeply we wanted it, or why. But when a door remains closed, motives begin rising to the surface. Do I want this because it serves a meaningful purpose, or because I need approval? Am I seeking restoration, or merely trying to prove something? Am I faithfully pursuing what matters, or have I made one outcome responsible for my peace? That examination is not failure. It can be preparation. Think again about the sequence preserved in Matthew 7. Ask, seek, knock. There is movement in the imagery. Asking uses the voice. Seeking requires searching. Knocking brings the seeker all the way to a threshold. By the time you are knocking, you are no longer speaking about the journey from a distance. You have reached the door. This is why persistence with conscious intention is more powerful than blind repetition. Nakshu says, keep participating. Amin reminds us, become firm enough that waiting does not destroy you. Together, they create a practical spiritual rhythm action without desperation, constancy without obsession, expectation without surrendering discernment. And perhaps that is the door many people overlook. Before an external opportunity opens, an internal transformation may already be taking place. The person who first approached the threshold may not be the same person standing there after weeks of faithful action. Perhaps you're wondering why these original teachings remained hidden for so long. That's why we created the Aramaic Wisdom Guide, because true knowledge sets us free. The link is waiting for you in the comments. If today's revelation has stirred something in your heart, don't let your journey end here. Our Aramaic Wisdom Guide was created to help you rediscover the original wisdom behind the words of Jesus. True knowledge sets us free, and you'll find the link waiting for you in the comments. Now we arrive at the moment when this teaching must leave the page and enter your daily life. Understanding Nakshu and Amin intellectually is not enough. Persistence becomes transformative when it develops a rhythm, and that rhythm must be simple enough to practice when the door still appears completely closed. For the next 7 days, begin each morning by identifying one meaningful door you are approaching. Do not choose 10 desires. Choose one situation connected to purpose, restoration, opportunity, relationship, or a decision that genuinely matters. Then quietly pronounce Naku 3 times Nakshu, Nahu, Nakshu. Let each repetition remind you that intention requires movement. Immediately afterward, ask yourself one practical question. What is my next knock? Your next knock may be sending the message you have postponed, making the call you fear making, completing an unfinished application, studying another hour, repairing a relationship, asking for guidance, or simply showing up again after disappointment. NAQSHU should never become an excuse for passive waiting. Attach the word to one concrete action. Then pronounce Amin slowly 3 times. Amin, Amin. Here, the focus changes. You are no longer thinking about the door. You are examining the person standing before it. Let Amin remind you of firmness and faithfulness. Your responsibility is not to control when the door moves. Your responsibility is to remain grounded enough to recognize what happens next. At night, return mentally to that same door. Ask whether today's action came from clear intention or desperation. If nothing changed externally, do not automatically call the day unsuccessful. Persistence often works invisibly before its results become visible. Perhaps you gain knowledge. Perhaps your intention became clearer. Perhaps you discovered that your approach must change. And there is one final safeguard. Every few days, ask whether this remains a door worth knocking on. NAQSHU does not mean breaking down every closed door. Sometimes wisdom says, continue. Sometimes wisdom redirects you. Conscious persistence listens while it acts. This is the daily rhythm. NAQSHU. Before the action, Amin within the waiting. Knock deliberately. Remain steady, observe carefully, adgaswisli. Then return tomorrow without allowing yesterday's silence to decide today's faithfulness. Because the deepest practice is not learning how to force a door open. It is becoming someone who can persist without losing peace, act without desperation, and recognize the right door when it finally begins to move. Now return to the image with which we began. A person stands before a closed door. The first knock receives no visible response. The second seems to disappear into silence. Days pass, and the temptation grows stronger. Perhaps nothing is happening. Perhaps I should stop. But now you understand why the teaching cannot end with the English word knock. NAQSH. You gives you the movement. Approach. Again. Act again. Take another conscious step. Amin gives you the inner foundation. Remain firm, trustworthy, faithful to what you have discerned, without turning persistence into desperation. One speaks to what your hand does at the door. The other helps illuminate what your heart must learn while waiting. This is where the promise of our title becomes personal. Persistence until you receive does not mean that every desire becomes a divine guarantee. Receiving can take different forms. Sometimes the door opens exactly as hoped. Sometimes you receive clarity that changes what you were seeking. Sometimes you discover another entrance. And sometimes what you receive first is the strength and discernment required for what comes next. That is why the teaching of Jesus remains so compelling. Ask, seek, knock. There is progression, participation, and movement. The seeker is not portrayed as spiritually asleep. waiting for life to happen. The seeker participates while remaining dependent on wisdom greater than personal desire. So when you encounter another closed door, remember these two sounds. Whisper Nakshu, Nakshu, and ask yourself what faithful action remains possible today. Then remember Amin Amin, and refuse to let delay turn your inner world into fear. Act where you can act. Wait where you must wait. Discern when you should continue and when wisdom is redirecting you. Just a quick reminder, the transformation guides for a fuller life are waiting for you, right there in the comments. Before you leave, if this message touched your heart or brought new understanding into your life, WRITE, the word restoration, in the comments below. Your testimony may encourage someone else who is seeking healing and renewal. Thank you for sharing this moment of ancient wisdom with us. Until the next revelation, walk in peace, walk in freedom, and walk in the power of NAQSH. You keep knocking with conscious intention. We are just scratching the surface of this ancient power. Get ready, because in our next video, I will reveal even deeper Aramaic codes that unlock spiritual authority you've never imagined. Make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on so you don't miss this unfolding revelation.